Hello, and welcome to the Shine More podcast, where we are shining a light on all things special education with a passion to help those with special needs and a mission to empower individuals with various abilities. Welcome back. We are here again with attorney Amber Donnelly. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Oh, you are very welcome. My pleasure.
So last time that we met, we discussed the guardianship process and we went through a few documents, a few websites, but now we're going into a part two where we can actually show you all some of the items that Attorney Donnelly mentioned. So I'm going to start it off with you so we can go into those resources.
Sure. And we'll do a quick recap. In part one, we talked about the difference between a guardianship and a guardian advocate. So if you're dealing with a guardianship, it's because a loved one is incapacitated versus a guardian advocate where you have a loved one who has a developmental disability. We also talked about the application for civil indigent status, which is a form that can be completed to help you waive some of those filing fees and costs associated with filing a guardianship case or a guardian advocate case. We also talked about what's next if the guardian or guardian advocate is unable to continue to serve in that role. You can have a successor guardian or what's called a standby guardian. And that's a person who's on deck, who submitted their paperwork. So the court is on notice that they're up next if the guardian or the guardian advocate is unable to serve in that role. And then I believe we briefly mentioned a resource that will help you walk through the documents that you need to complete if you decide under a guardian advocate that you want to represent yourself. And one big difference between guardianship and guardian advocate, with a guardianship, the guardian is required to have an attorney. With a guardian advocate, the guardian advocate is not required to have an attorney and they can represent themselves pro se. So we'll start with the civil indigent status form, which is
Okay.
the form that you can complete to help waive some of those filing fees and costs associated with filing a case.
Okay, and I am going to share my screen. All right. So this is where we get that information from. We went to Florida courts or flcourts.gov. We then go to, let me start back here. We go to family law forms. So family law forms, and then right here is where we will find apply for civil indigent status. I'm going to click on that. And there is a search bar that you all can use and type that in. And I will let Attorney Donnelly go through the form a bit further.
Yes. So with this form at the top, you're going to include the county where you are filing your case at in the caption where it reads in the circuit or county court of the, you need the judicial circuit that you're in, and then in and for the county you are filing the case in. If you don't know the circuit number, you can reach out to the clerk at the courthouse to get that information. You can also identify the plaintiff or petitioner or in the best interest of. So here you would include for the guardian advocate of the name of the loved one you're seeking the guardian advocate for or the guardianship for. It's important to know on this application, if you are the one who's seeking to serve as the guardian or the guardian advocate, you're not going to include your personal information. So the first question is, I have blank dependents. You're going to include the information for your loved one who needs a guardian or a guardian advocate. Do they have any dependents? So you would include that information there. If they have income, you're going to include their not net income. If they have other forms of income, a second job, Social Security, unemployment, retirement, veterans benefits, you're going to choose yes or no. And if the answer is yes, you're going to include the dollar amount. The key here is you're not going to include your personal information on this form because you are the one trying to help your loved one. So you're going to include their personal information when it comes to dependents, their income. And if you scroll down, Kia, any assets that they may own. If they have cash on hand, bank accounts, money market accounts, savings bonds, motor vehicles, homestead. And I will tell you, in most of my cases where I'm representing the guardian advocate, their loved one may receive SSI, but they don't really have any other property or assets. So a lot of these are going to be no. In terms of liabilities, if they have a motor vehicle, a home, a boat, you would include the debts associated with that. I have a private lawyer in this case. Again, you're doing it for your loved one, so it would be no. You are free to sign and date and provide your information as the loved one who's completing the form. But I typically have my clients sign their names and then put for the benefit of whoever they're seeking the guardian or guardian advocate for. And you submit this form, and then the clerk determines whether or not the person is indigent or not indigent. If the person is indigent, meaning they can't afford to pay for the filing fees in a case, they can't afford to pay for the attorney that will be appointed for the individual who you're seeking a guardianship or guardian advocate for, those fees would be waived if they are deemed indigent. And it's hundreds of dollars, possibly thousands of dollars, that family members can save by completing this form.
Great. That's great information. Thank you so much for that. The next site that Amber mentioned to us, Attorney Donnelly, was Turning 18. Here is that site.
So I got to tell you, when I was first introduced to this site, I was so excited about it. I believe it's a nonprofit organization or a law firm that's a nonprofit and provides legal services to indigent folks who created this website. So Turning 18, getting in the mindset of your loved one with a developmental disability, turning 18 and being considered an adult. And now what do you do? Because they still need help and support when it comes to making decisions, determining what doctors they go to, or managing any income they may have coming in, especially if you're not the payee. So this website is a great resource to be able to get additional information about guardian advocates in particular, but it also provides the documents you would need to complete if you're representing yourself. So Key, if you click on Getting Started.
Okay.
So it gives you some background information about being a parent or a foster parent for someone with a developmental disability and what needs to happen when this person is turning 18. So just some basic information there. And I think this may be it for this page. And then you can click Next.
Okay.
And then it mentions a partner that can help. And this is where Turning 18 can help. There's free nonprofit services that can guide you through the process. Something else to consider, you can go it alone and complete the application and the documents yourself, or if you are a certain percentage below the poverty line, you can reach out to a local legal aid office to see if they're in position to represent you so you're not doing it yourself. But again,
now will they give you the information of different legal aid offices depending on the location?
I believe there is some additional information in here. We can keep scrolling through to the next. So then more information, but then it says Get Started. And if you click Next, it breaks down the different type of support that can be provided for your loved one who may need support. I think the first one, if you'll scroll back up a little bit, it says supported decision making. So does your loved one need someone who can step in and make decisions on their behalf regarding their education, regarding their health care, regarding their monies, regarding where they live, regarding whether or not they have the right to travel? And in most cases, when we're dealing with a guardian advocate, the loved one needs support when it comes to decision making. The next category, I believe, is estate planning. So this is for someone who may have a developmental disability, but they're high functioning and very independent.
Okay.
If that's the case, they can create a durable power of attorney with the help of an attorney or someone else,
Mhm.
to be able, preferably an attorney, to be able to identify who they want to be able to make financial decisions for them or medical decisions for them. So they would sign off giving authority to someone versus the court giving someone authority over them.
Okay, okay.
But again, somebody high functioning,
Mhm.
independent, with the ability to say, I want a durable power of attorney because I want my mother to make financial decisions for me, or I want a healthcare surrogate because I want my dad to be able to make decisions for me regarding healthcare decisions, which is an option for those who are high functioning.
Mhm.
And
Gotcha.
then the last one, the guardian advocate process, where the court is vetting someone who has an interest in serving in this role, and the court is the one appointing and giving the power to the guardian advocate. And again, there's court oversight, there's annual reporting, and you have to make sure that you are abiding with the law when it comes to the guardian advocate. Although you're not required to have an attorney in this process, there are additional layers to being overseen by the court.
Okay.
So this kind of goes through which option is right for you. So it really depends on the needs of your loved one. It depends on where they are on the spectrum. It depends on how much support that they need. But
Mhm.
again, most of my clients, we're in the land of a guardian advocate because I typically represent the parents who are taking care of their adult children who have Down syndrome or cerebral palsy or autism. And the decision making on their own is not there. The ability to do an estate plan is not there. And so we land in guardian advocate.
Okay. Okay. So I see it just continues to go, and here's information on taking to guardianship
Mhm.
advocacy.
So this gives you more information and allows you to determine whether or not your loved one qualifies for a guardian advocate. So there are very specific diagnoses that one must have: an intellectual disability, cerebral palsy, autism, spina bifida, Prader-Willi, Down syndrome, or Phelan-McDermott syndrome. So it's not, sometimes people think it may be for someone who has mental health issues.
Mhm.
That's not on the list.
Right.
Bipolarism, not
Mhm.
on the list. We're really thinking of people who the parents have known since they were born or
Mhm.
when they were in vitro that they were going to have some special needs.
Okay. And I see that it says here, this disability needs to have manifested before the age of 18. So as long as there's some type of documentation that shows that this diagnosis or eligibility occurred before that age, then
Correct.
okay.
Correct. And typically the documentation that I'm providing to the court with a request to appoint a guardian advocate would be a letter from a doctor identifying the diagnosis,
Mhm.
or an evaluation typically conducted by a psychologist that outlines what the
Okay.
diagnosis is. And again,
Now, will that include a school psychologist?
typically when my clients come to me, it's psychological exams that they've had when the child was a toddler, if not
Okay.
earlier.
Mhm.
Because again, early on, they knew that
Right.
something was going on. I have one client, she said when she was pregnant, she knew she was going to have a child with Down syndrome because of the
Mhm.
testing that is done. So she
Mhm.
knew well ahead of time. So when the daughter was born and she did have Down syndrome, it's documented early on.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. Okay.
You may be able to use a school psychologist, but typically the evaluations I see are from private psychologists that people have been referred to by their medical doctor.
Okay.
Because if it's someone who's 3 years old, they're not in school yet,
Right.
so they're just
Right.
identifying things.
Right. However, on our end, sometimes there are some early intervention sectors that where they are evaluated by school psychologists. So I'm sure it's probably, as long as the documentation says a school psychologist, and if not, I'm sure parents can go further and get that further information, or make sure to have that documentation from someone else, or from someone that their doctor may tell them to go to. But I know that there are some diagnoses, or rather in education field, we call it eligibilities, but it does occur from school psychologists, and they give them the diagnosis, or they give them the eligibility, not necessarily the diagnosis, but the eligibility.
So so typically what I see is a comprehensive evaluation that has been done by the psychologist, and
Okay.
then the diagnosis. This
Okay.
person has Down syndrome, spina bifida, autism.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. So I see that this website has a plethora of information, different things that families, parents, guardians can go through and check out. Thank you so much for bringing this to our attention and sharing this with us, and also the forums. So that was definitely some great information. Is there anything else that you can think of that might be helpful for families that are going through this process, or looking to start to go through this process of guardianship?
I would say this website, we really just scratched the surface.
Mhm.
Definitely take a deep dive into turning 18, to go through the different information. And as you see, it gives you information, and then it gives you different buttons you can click on depending
Right.
on where you think you need to go. And as I mentioned, if you find out that, hey, I need to do the guardian advocate, it will take you to a page where it has all the forms that you would need to complete, and the ability to complete them and be able to file them with the court along with that application of civil indigent status, which I think is incredible. So I would say start here, because this is a wide range of information. And again, we just scratched the surface. So take the time to look through this. It's written in a way that's easy to understand, it's user friendly, and will be a great resource for those family members who are at a point where they need to determine what is the best course of action to be able to care for their loved one.
That is awesome. I'm gonna stop sharing. Okay. That is great information. Thank you so much for sharing that with us and allowing us to start the conversation, the dialogue for some families that may just they just are getting ready for this process. And like you said, we're just scratching the surface, but it's a good starting point. And it gives parents or guardians or family members an area where they can get started. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. I appreciate you for taking your time out of your busy schedule for not only part one, but part two. So we appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you soon.